Welcome back, boys. This is episode 12 of the Top Bin Talks podcast, presented to you by FTF Canada. Shout out FTF. Today, we have a different interview, but at the same time, still staying within the realms of soccer, within Canada soccer. This is Richard Bucciarelli, one of the most scholastically reviewed people I've ever met. My personal trainer in the off season for the past 3 years now, 3 years now. Yep. Also a friend, and I'm just gonna read off his accomplishments because man, this is a lot. PhD candidate in kinesiology, CSCS, CSEP, CEP, USSF, he's a professional fitness coach, sports scientist, a coach educator, and owner of Soccer Fitness Incorporated. He works specifically with soccer specific strength and conditioning, and he has worked at some of the highest levels within Canada in the CPL, in United States, the USL, with Toronto FC Academy, and in the Uruguayan second division. He was most recently with Halifax Wanderers, who now it has another fellow Canadian, Patrice, at the helm. He's doing a separate PhD, in human health and nutritional sciences with a specialty in biomechanics of speed and acceleration training for soccer players. Damn, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going. No, that's not it. He has presented his research at some of the world's largest and most prestigious soccer-specific sports science and coaching conferences, including the World Congress on Science and Football, the World Conference on Science and Soccer, the National Soccer Coaching Convention, the Ontario Soccer Summit, and the Futsal Canada Conference. Right now, he holds certifications for Sport for Life Movement Preparation Instructor, FIFA 11 Plus instructor, Ontario Soccer Learning Facilitator. He works as a professor of exercise science and physiology at George Brown College in Toronto, provides coaching education for Ontario Soccer, Canada Soccer, and the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada, and has had over 50 of his articles published in research journals, books, and soccer magazines. I think that was the best one because I did not know any of that.
So
round of applause.
Sure, for the audience.
I want to just and I have to apologize, Kwame. I might have sent you an older document. So right now I'm actually at I'm not at George Brown anymore. I'm at the University of Guelph Humber, and maybe we can get into it. But I don't work anymore with Ontario Soccer or Canada Soccer, and perhaps we can discuss that a little. But thank you, man. And it's too much. I need to cut some of the things off my.
Why? If you got it, if you got it, you got to let it show, man. If you got it, you got to let it show.
Right. Fair enough.
For those who don't know, I met Richard about 3 years ago. Obviously, I met you through actually a close friend. He told me about your facility that you have in Vaughan Sportsplex at the back. A lot of people wouldn't know unless they are frequent goers of Vaughan Sportsplex, but you've helped me in the past 2-3 years reach my as much as I can my physical to get my physical performance levels ready for the preseason. I haven't had any complaints. I've been fit for the past 3 years, last 3 years,
sure.
And we've solely focused on obviously the biomechanics of my sprinting, strength component, the explosive component, and the fitness component. And obviously, I don't know if I ever told you, but thank you. I really appreciate you giving me a place to get ready for off-season, especially in the cold winters in Toronto. He doesn't. Adam has no idea how it is. So he's in the West Coast. He's just in the West Coast relaxing.
It's snowing here. It's snowing.
It's not the same snow.
Yeah, and Kwame, thank you, man, for all your hard work, and it's my honor to work with professional, hardworking athletes, and so you're one of the top. So thank you. All right.
So to start, first question is going to be those who don't know you, obviously you've been around the sport for a long time, but can you give us a background of like how you got your passion for the game of football?
Sure. So long story short, but I was I'm a child of Italian immigrants and grew up in Toronto, and my family was into soccer, so I actually have a twin brother. We played at a young age, and believe it or not,
you didn't tell me that.
I never told you, but yeah. So we played whatever house league and this and that, and eventually rep, and I was a decent player. I was a good athlete, a good runner, and a decent player. I played in university at York. And I know you mentioned Patrice. He and I were actually teammates at York.
Wow.
So you know how old I am. And Bobby, who you know as well, was your coach at Hamilton, was also a teammate of mine at York. So it's a small world a little bit. But I played in university and for a couple of years in the CPSL, the Canadian Professional Soccer League. This is way before TFC and all that. And as I said, I wasn't really good enough to do anything as a player, but I was always very passionate about the game. And at the time, I was at York studying kinesiology, and I was also coaching, like a lot of young, especially the people that the guys that play on the university teams. A lot of times, you get invited to go coach. And at the time, our head coach at York was a technical director at the Kleinberg Soccer Club, so he brought me and some other people in there to coach. And so essentially, I was studying sports science, I was playing, I was coaching, and when you have a kinesiology degree, you don't necessarily have like a direct career. There's some people go into medicine or physiotherapy or other teaching, whatever. And for me, I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll try my hand at fitness training for soccer. I was coaching kids, and some of the parents they knew that I was a fitness coach and a personal trainer, and they saw some of the workouts that I was doing after coaching, and they said, "Oh, maybe will you train my son?" And I said, "Sure." So I started training a couple of these kids from the team. Then some other coaches from the club saw, and then they offered if I would train their team. And so by the time I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I had this little part-time business. And I, at the time, like we're talking 2003, literally 20 years ago. And so at that time, I basically, there were some companies that were doing dryland training. They called it for hockey. So fitness companies, which were training, hockey players off the ice, and they call that dryland. But there was no such thing in soccer. So I was obviously very aware that players needed fitness. I could see that a lot of them weren't getting it from clubs or whatever environment they were in. So I decided to start my company, and I called it Soccer Fitness. And basically, I made it. Yeah, I started a business doing fitness training for soccer, and eventually, lots of other opportunities and things came out of that. I started to coach and to be a fitness coach. First with my school, York, where I was a player. Eventually with some other universities. Eventually got connected with the provincial program. From there, the women's national teams program. From there, TFC, and eventually some other professional clubs. I know you kind of listed them. So I've had sort of a long, winding road to get to where I am now. But I started, I guess, probably like a lot of other coaches and anyone else. I played the game. I always loved it, and still do try to kick around here and there when I can. And to me, this career was sort of like the next best thing to being a professional player. And as I said, I wasn't good enough to do that. So this was the next best option for me. So.
Wow. I mean, you went through the whole journey, and that's a perfect synopsis of how I guess that's the perfect synopsis of your journey. Going back to the York University thing, now it makes so much sense why Vaughn and Sigma have a beef. Not to think that Bobby and Patrice and all these guys played against each other. Now all the dots are connected. I never thought the dots will connect going through you. See, this is stuff I've never known.
Small world.
As you know, obviously me being a pro right now, and Adam going through high levels in college, and obviously when he was at Vancouver, Seattle. Kids in general that we don't like fitness. But how do you make fitness more engaging for today's generation? What's the importance of speed training, weight training, and fitness? Obviously, soccer is mostly running. A lot of people don't understand. I think I seen a stat where Xavi Hernandez, someone who's on the ball at Barcelona, is probably on the ball around 5-10 minutes if you look at his clips, because of how much the ball. The rest of the time you're running, jumping, sprinting, you know what I mean, moving, walking.
Yeah.
So and the game's an hour and a half. So an hour and 20 minutes that you don't even have the ball. So how do you make it more engaging for guys such as myself? Because till this day, I still I don't like fitness. So when someone tells you get on the line, there's no ball, but like you're not enjoying it. But like, how do you make it more engaging for kids to be like, hey, I know you don't like it, but this is what you need, and how you make them accept like that this is part of the
right.
profession.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'll give two parts to the answer. So the first is everybody involved in the game, coaches, fitness coaches, and players. It's very important for everyone to understand that the game itself and the training on the pitch is a form of exercise, and therefore is and can be a form of fitness. And this is, it may sound like common sense, but often, there is this thought that fitness for soccer needs to be done, in a gym or whatever, and not on the field. I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because, I have a facility and we do lots of training in the gym, and I'll talk about that. But first, I want to say that, one of the limitations that we have here in Canada, and it's unique here, and it's because of the low quality of our coach education, is that we don't demand of our coaches to learn enough about fitness and sports science, even at the higher levels of the licensing. This is unique to Canada. So, and it's two things. First of all, in most other countries, coaches who go through the licensing, typically, if they're not a high-level professional, there's someone who starts with a sports science degree or a kinesiology degree. It's very common. I know, I've been in many countries. I've studied a bit in Portugal, and I've been to Uruguay. I've been kind of all over the world. And so it's very common that most people who get into coaching start from a sports science background, or, they were a very high-level player. If they were a high-level player, they were exposed to very good coaching and training. But in any case, they have that background, and the licensing has a sports science component, and it's very demanding. So that in those other countries develops a culture around and an understanding that you can build fitness in the game and through training, using training exercises, small-sided games, etc. So we don't do a good job of that in Canada. And so, like what you said, Kwame, it's very common. You say, yeah, I don't like fitness. I don't, it's not fun. If there's no ball, it's not, motivating and all that. Of course, that's true. So that's why a significant component of fitness training for all soccer players, and I say from the young all the way to the professional, must be done within the training session, and coaches need to be taught how to do it. And they can be. I created a course, and for about 2-3 years, I taught the course on my own. For about another 5 or 6 years, I taught it both on my own and through Ontario Soccer. And again, there was a little falling out, which perhaps we can talk about later. But my course is called the Soccer Fitness Trainers Course, and is designed to teach coaches how to do fitness on the field. So that's the first thing. It's much more fun. It's much more engaging, and you get excellent results when you can build fitness on the pitch. Now, that being said, the second answer, there are certain things that you cannot do on a soccer field, and you need a gym and you need equipment for. Some simple examples. The first would be resistance. So to really get stronger, you need to, you need to move your muscles against heavy resistance, squats, bench press, these types of exercises. You don't get that on the field. So there's a certain, those exercises you need to be in a gym to do. As you know, in my facility, we've really been kind of specialized more in speed. And part of that is these high speed treadmills, and also treadmills that don't have motors, where there's resistance. And so what that does, compared to what you can do on the field, when you're on the field, all you can do when you're running is run as fast as you can. And I can tell you, even in a full 90-minute professional game, most players never reach their maximum.
Never hit. I know that. Yeah.
Because you have to run for 30-40 meters straight. And maybe if you play on the wing and it's a counterattack or something, you might do it. But even if you do, it's once or twice. And in training, it's rare, right? Because you don't really train all of it. So the idea is that players don't sprint a lot in training and in games, and even if they do, it's only a few times. So to develop speed and those qualities, often you need equipment and technology and stuff that forces you to run a bit faster. And so my answer is, first, you build fitness on the field, and second, you look at the qualities that you need the extra equipment to do, and you educate players, and you say, look, hey, you don't like it? Fair enough. But you know what? You're a professional. And the reality is that being a professional sometimes requires doing things that you don't like. You might not like, going to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock every day. You might not like.
I'm in bed at that time.
Yeah, you might not like the fact that if you go with your friends that are not, footballers, and they can whatever drink and eat whatever they want, and you have to be careful with things, and so all of it, right? So there are sacrifices, and in the end, we make it fun on the field as much as we can, but in the end, there's also a sacrifice, and the higher the level, the more sacrifices have to be made. And the truth is that most of the players that are more successful, I can say at the professional level that I've worked with, they're good, but they also have a more professional attitude, and that includes a willingness to sacrifice. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would say too, like when I worked with my sprint coach, Richard, and we might bring him on later.
Yeah, sure.
And in a future one, which would be cool to kind of to get someone else's opinion. But the one thing that I found, especially with regarding like sprint training, the one thing that I was someone who, if Kwame hates fitness, it was like my worst enemy. Like worse, I hated it. I like, a standard Cooper test. I hated it. It's just like I get bored, all that stuff. The thing I found with sprint training was the variability in it though, where you're doing sprint stuff, whether it's on a treadmill, whether it's on a field, the lifting aspect of it, you're doing like the variability of the type of fitness. I found way more impactful and intriguing about it rather than great run for 8 minutes. Because that just seems like it's a newer type of fitness.
So I'll tell you, it's interesting you say that, because so you mentioned two things. You mentioned the Cooper test, which is it's a test of aerobic fitness, but it's continuous, right? You just run for 12 minutes and the maximum distance, and in the end, more or less, the soccer players that can do more distance on that test are probably the fitter ones, but it's not relevant to the game, and neither is training in that way, which continuous training, and that's sort of old school. Like that, I know I'm older than you guys, but like back in the day, a lot of the training for soccer would have resembled almost the same type of training you would do as a middle distance runner. And as I said, I was a pretty good 800-meter runner, so that was kind of I did a lot of that kind of training, and I had a background in that. But the thing to keep in mind with both testing and training in the game is that it has to be specific and relevant to the game. So the new tests, and the most popular one, which I use all the time, and probably a lot of the more recent fitness coaches and coaches use, is the yo-yo test. And it's not fun either. It's not like it's a fun test, but the yo-yo test has a period of fast running and then a rest period. And so that looks a lot more like soccer. There's a fast run and then a rest, and it's intermittent. And then the test is actually literally called the yo-yo intermittent recovery test. So it has that word in it. So the testing needs to look like that. And those tests are actually more valid. So even some of the work that I've done, when you use GPS and you measure how much running players do in a game, that test, the yo-yo test, is the best predictor of how much fast running a player can do in a game. And it makes sense because it's more specific. Training also should look like that. So, I rebranded my company to Speed Training, mainly because we started working along with soccer with other athletes. But the training that we do essentially looks the same way. We make them sprint or do a very fast run, never more than about 20 seconds, and often only 4 or 5 seconds at a time. Then we rest, and then we sprint again. So that looks exactly like the kind of running that you do in the game. The testing also looks like what you do in the game. It's more relevant, it's more specific. And in the end, that speaks to the importance also of using the game to train fitness, because no matter what we do in the lab, we can never replicate exactly what you do in the game. The only way to do that is by playing the game. So
yeah. And I'll just say one more thing. I really love how you talked about educating the coaches side of it, because I remember same thing. Every single time it was fitness, it was like, oh, it's like you're just basically told the basics as a player.
Yeah.
Like if you can run more, you can last longer, you'll be better, and you can play better. Yeah. But the specific fitness you were doing, you weren't actually told as to why that was important. And that's what I found when I got to sprint training, whether it was you're in the gym, and sometimes it was like it'd be my third workout of the day, but it was because this one was specifically to test my body to a point where now my body's used to being tested that. So if I go in a game and it's late, my body's used to being tested now, when that's when you get injured, is when your body's not used to a specific level of resistance or a specific level of force, and then it happens. So it was going through this re-education thing as a player where I was like, this makes total sense. And this, like, it was almost having like a newfound appreciation for going in the gym.
Right.
And going and doing this specific training, because you're being told like this is why you want to do it, And if that doesn't turn a light bulb for a player, then, well, nothing really is going to.
Yeah, and I would say that there's no way that you as a player or any player is going to get that information if the coach doesn't have it. And so, and I honestly, like, I don't blame coaches, because the truth is that, coach, like, if you grow up here and you get into, becoming a coach, you take the courses that you have with and you go through the pathway, and you have to go there under the assumption that you're getting good information.
The best.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that they are getting good information, especially when it comes to the physical side of things. And I'll go even beyond that, and I'll say it's not really even what I believe. I know, because I've worked. First of all, I've done licensing in the United States, so I have an A license there, so I know exactly what the curriculum is over there. I worked, as I said, in Uruguay, and I was able to sit in on some of the A license courses that my head coach Rafael Carvajal, who he was taking those licenses at that time. And through the work that I do, especially the academic work, I work with a lot of professors and sports scientists who are instructors in the licensing courses in Portugal and Italy and England. And the truth is that if you do a UEFA license, there are mandatory fitness components delivered by experts, PhDs, people that have worked with national teams and professional clubs, and the coaches have to meet a standard. They have to take exams, they have to write papers. They don't have to be experts in the same way that someone who studies it all the time and whatever. So they're not an expert, but they know enough that they could put together, let's say, for example, a periodization plan, a physical periodization, and do it properly. That they could develop training for speed or aerobic endurance or whatever in their practice and do it on their own. And the reason I say this is so important, especially in Canada, is because almost all of the clubs, academies, whatever, that are working with young players do not have a fitness coach there more than once a week. Which means if the coach lacks the knowledge, then there is nothing being imparted to the players. So
I understand where you're coming from exactly. I mean, you get around different types of coaches. I've obviously been blessed to have someone like Patrick Vieira, Bobby, and those guys who have done their licensing in overseas and stuff like that. Personally, we've never had a strength coach at Sigma. It was Bobby, like a strength fitness coach. But like he's incorporated. I Sigma for how many years? Like 6-7 years. I've never seen anyone get a major injury from how much we played. We trained 4 times a week and played once on the weekend, sometimes twice on the weekend. And like, obviously when you're younger, you're able to keep up that kind of motor because, like, I don't know, you haven't really done any harm to your body in general.
You have a lot of testosterone. You have not a lot of mileage.
Not a lot of mileage on your body. So like, I always tell people, I'm like, we didn't have a strength coach. And like, even when I was going to NYCFC, the person who ran our training sessions was the strength and conditioning coach. He would tell Patrick, no, that's enough. You'll tell Patrick, you'll be looking at the GPSs. Patrick would be like, oh, can we do one more rep? He'd be like, no, that's like, he had that clock to a perfection. We didn't. The only thing was my first time, and all the professional teams I played for, the only team, surprisingly, that we did fitness testing was Forge. We did the yo-yo. But the yo-yo, honestly, as much as you hate that, like, if you just got to do it once, it's like, all right, like, it's 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Let me knock it out the way. Like, I'm going to be exhausted.
What's the minimum I need to hit? That was my mentality.
Yeah.
What's the minimum level?
And
we're going to train. We're going to train after this and then do a 2-a-day because it's preseason. Minimum. What's my minimum?
So like they'll give us the minimum, and then like we'll, like, some guys, like, when you hit the minimum, you're like, damn, I still got more in my legs. So you're like, okay, let me keep going until I get tired. But then obviously it goes position wise, right? Like, more like Becker used to be really good at the yo-yo. Even though I hated it, I was always good at it.
Yeah, but like, you have a good engine.
I just hated the fact that I was running for no reason. There was no ball. But then once he put us in a 5v5 or anything like that, because of the mental and the physical component, I think we throw away the mental component, just think about the physical component when it comes to fitness, like when we're doing without the ball. So that makes us despise it a lot more. Whereas soccer, when you're playing 5-a-side, like, you might be exhausted, but you're like, damn, I can't get scored on. I can't look bad in front of the coach. I have to make sure I get this pass. So there's so much, you're thinking so much that like you're forcing your body to go through these actions, even though you'll be more tired than if you were doing the yo-yo test. So
yeah, it's funny. It's funny because that mental side of it too, like that's like the only piece that that at least I was ever told when I was younger about fitness is like, oh, if you're tired in the 90th minute, like if you can get through this is where you're going to come up, and you're like 100%, like you understand that side of it. And I think like, again, the educational side, if you can blend it with that, where all of a sudden, you know, why you're doing the fitness, why it's important for your body as the player, as well as understanding it's a mental test, like your body can withstand it. Like
100%.
You can hold a plank for a minute. You can hold the plank for a minute. Like it's that mental side of it where it's not because your body can't do it. No one's gonna like, again, I think part of like the fitness industry where they get a bad rap is where you see some of those stupid videos online where they're doing a wall sit with a plate on their lap and the coach is standing on top or something like that. And you're like
unrealistic stuff.
Like, but it's just like they get stupid shit like that where it's like, no, like that's not educating anyone. That's not actually showing the fit, like what's your body capable of, because that's the mental test, is showing like your body is capable of doing this.
Right. So two things that you guys said that it kind of stuck out to me. The first comment is that, like, we'll talk about Bobby and so and just kind of that idea of Sigma not having a fitness coach. So Bobby does have a kinesiology degree.
Yeah,
right?
no,
Okay.
I know he does.
Yeah, and you know, a UEFA, I don't know, A license or maybe even pro. So he did his education in Europe, and I know he started very young. He started a year or two, because he and I were close.
20. He said 20 years old or something like that.
Yeah, like he and I graduated around the same time, and I feel like he went straight to Greece first, and then to Holland, and anyway, so he was very ahead of the game in terms of education. And so not having a fitness coach, yes, fair enough. But he's got enough knowledge that he can build fitness again on the field, because it can be done. Yep. It's not so that's him. Now, that being said, also, okay, you're talking about, you know, when you got to the pro level and all that, there's conditioning coaches and so the truth is, first of all, there's not one right or wrong way to do it. In my course, I teach this, and this is maybe an interesting concept. It's not hard to follow, right? You can almost imagine a continuum with specificity on one side and predictability on the other. Okay, so you can train anywhere on that continuum. If you want to train with specificity, that means as specific to soccer as possible. You're going to lose the ability to predict, because soccer is random. So you put players in a small-sided game or whatever, right? It's very specific, but maybe, as an example, a very talented player can hide in that game, and he doesn't work as hard as the others. Maybe, you know, the work rate is not the same for everybody. It's not predictable as much. Now, on the other side, you can come to my facility and we can, you know, do a series of treadmill sprints where we know the speed, we know the incline, we can film you so we can correct mechanics, we can measure your heart rate, we can do everything is predictable. But then you lose the specificity. So there's not a right and a wrong way to do it. There's many ways. Some people go a little more specific, less predictable, some the other. But, you know, it's there's lots of different ways, you know, that are effective to build fitness, but it has to come down to knowledge. And so there's a knowledge gap with coaches here. And so they don't get, you know, optimal training. And I know we can talk a little more about that. The other point, Adam, I think, and you guys both kind of touched on it, is the mental side of things. And so this is what I would say. A coach who knows what he's doing, or he or she, right? If they know what they're doing, okay, they should be able to get players to understand that there is a psychological benefit to hard physical training, as well as a physical benefit. Okay. And the truth is, sometimes that's also an advantage of doing work that's more predictable, because you know that you're working for whatever, a 30-second interval at a certain heart rate, and you may never do that in a game. That's fine. But if you're physically capable of pushing through and doing something that's really, really demanding, then in those moments where you're very fatigued, in an extra time situation, in a time where you're behind, you're down a goal, and you get a player sent off from a red card, in those moments, you know, a lot of times, if you look at the moments that decide the outcome of a game, maybe you can't measure it exactly, but often it's not because the player is too physically tired to step in and make a tackle or whatever. It's because their response to the fatigue is to give up. rather than to try to overcome it, because often your body is actually, capable of doing more than you think it is. I've done this with that yo-yo test where we have a heart rate monitor on every player, and we look at, just as an example, if you get to your maximum heart rate, this is the highest heart rate you can be at. It's, the intensity is very high. Some players, when they get to their maximum heart rate, they stop right away. And others, even if they're less fit, they get to their maximum heart rate and they keep going for 30 seconds or whatever. And my opinion would be perhaps it's those ones that are willing to push through their maximum heart rate and can maintain, even if they're not as fit. Those ones might be the ones that you want more as a coach, because when push comes to shove, those are the ones that maybe are going to perform a little better when they're really tired. So, yeah.
Wow, man. I mean, that you hit the nail on the head. I mean, for those that are going to be listening to this, I mean, I guess you're able to put it in terms where us as professionals, and I'm gonna give Adam the benefit of the high level division, Division 1, Division 2, Division 1, right?
D2.
D2, but
SFU's
you guys, yeah, y'all should have been Division 1 in the way y'all were smoking teams. But hey, you guys you're giving us a different way to look at obviously fitness and things like that. And coaching is definitely something that definitely needs to change, and we can touch base on that. I know you've helped at the Ontario Soccer Association, Canada Soccer, Ottawa Fury, which is now Athletico Ottawa in the CPL, Halifax. How did working with those associations within Canada, knowing that what you know about the coaching, like how did you react, or how did you get through those specific points in your journey?
So it's a good question, and one of the things that I've just been very fortunate, honestly, that even from back in my days as a player at university, and I'll just start with that, just because in Canadian universities when I played, which is 1999 to 2004, I guess, almost all the schools, the coaches, and they were nice guys and whatever, but it was usually a faculty member. And it wasn't just in soccer. Almost every varsity team was, maybe they were knowledgeable or whatever, but they weren't like professional coaches. But at York, I was very fortunate. I played for Bassam, who is the guy that runs the A&B Academy now.
Okay, yeah.
A&B, you guys probably played against him and stuff. And he was a professional coach. He had a UEFA A license. He actually had a Brazilian A license. Wow. And as I said, I had a twin brother that at the same time that I was at York played it on U of T, and U of T again had more of the kind of the old school coach, and nice guy. His name was Jim Lefkos and all that. But we would talk a lot of times about the training we were doing, and with us, we were doing, I thought, a very, very professional training methodology. It felt really, it felt like something that would have been done in a professional or national team. And from there, I also played at York for Paul James. And Paul James was a former Canadian national team player. He played in the World Cup in 1986. He had, again, education outside of Canada, both in UEFA and in the United States. And so I was fortunate to be exposed to professional coaches, even as a player. And then when I worked, I know you mentioned some of those clubs. So Ottawa Fury, I worked with a coach named Nikola Popovic, who was from Portugal. He actually had done the same UEFA pro license as Jose Mourinho. So this guy, again, had, he was actually using the tactical periodization model. So I really, I learned quite a lot from him. And he was educated, again, outside of Canada. If I think about my time in Uruguay, I mean, I worked with Rafael Carvajal, who to me is one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. He's Uruguayan Canadian, but also, again, studied in the United States, studied in UEFA. He worked as the assistant coach for Benito Floro with the men's national team here in Canada. So it's like a lot of this knowledge transfer from really top European coach licensing programs. I was able to benefit from that in my career. Even in Halifax, I worked with Stephen Hart, who's an old friend and a good colleague, and from Trinidad, has lots of experience both with Canadian national team and the Trinidad national team. Stephen was a guy that really was used to that model, though. And I know you mentioned it even with Patrick Vieira, where the fitness coach is an assistant coach and is often the second in charge other than the head coach. And that was the same way that it was with me in Ottawa with Nicola, and the same way that it was with me in Uruguay with Rafael. So this is another thing. We don't do that in Canada unless we have a foreign coach that has that experience and comes from that culture. And so again, I benefited from the knowledge of all of these guys. And even in Halifax, we had an assistant coach that actually had an amazing background. He actually had been a third assistant with Rafa Benitez. So he was from Spain, and he worked in China with Rafa Benitez. And so it's like, in the end, a lot of times, like yes, I worked with these Canadian clubs and all that, but the clubs themselves have actually benefited a lot from foreign knowledge and foreign coaches, and as has Bobby. And you can see the results.
100%.
I'll tell you one thing that I know I said this on another podcast last week is Forge last year was the one club, and every time we played them, even in the preseason, where I was thinking like, man, like we can't compete with these guys. Like they, and you can look at the results. I think they beat us 4-1 one time. They scored 5 goals on us another game. So it's like every other game was very close. We were very competitive with Ottawa. We beat Pacific, even over there in their field and stuff. So I think that even the coaching knowledge and everything that a guy like Bobby has really translated. So I've benefited a lot from that, and I think our other coaches would benefit a lot from that too. So
it's crazy that you say that, because you're saying that a lot of Canadian coaches had to go overseas to get these licenses. It kind of reminds me of like the Canadian player having to go overseas to get opportunity. Like how we had to go to college to get opportunity to play. I never thought it would be like that where Canadian coaches, because you always think about, Canada has a coaching licensing program, this and that. Like you said, you would expect the coaches to get the best information available to them, right? But they're kind of playing with the cards that have been dealt, right?
Let me put it to you this way, okay? Everywhere else in the world that I've been, and I'll list again, the United States, several countries in Europe, and in Uruguay. And Uruguay, actually, they do the same license as Argentina. So I've seen quite a bit of, some of the top countries in the world. Everywhere else, the people who are the instructors in the lower level up to the higher level licensing courses are people that have experience at the top national team level as coaches, at the youth national team level as coaches, and in professional clubs. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Canada is, as to my knowledge, the only country where the people who teach the coach licensing, not only do they not have that level of experience, some of them, including some of the people that are in leadership positions here in Ontario, have almost no coaching experience. This is unheard of anywhere else in the world. Okay. So to me, it's the equivalent of going to, let's say, for example, a medical school, right? You pay, you enroll, you expect top, knowledge and knowledge translation and all that. And instead of the professors in the medical school being physicians with years of experience and all of it, they are beginners. They sometimes have a much lower level of experience than the students do. Okay. You would never go to a medical school with those instructors. You'd never go to a law school where the professors in the school are not lawyers and don't have experience. But that is exactly what we have here. So
wow. See, I guess it is equivalent, like how Canadian players, we didn't have the opportunity or have the best infrastructure to, like, now we have the CPL, God, thank God. But before we had to go through college, or guys had to go overseas and test. Like at a young age, you're like, okay, I'm a 16, 17-year-old kid trying to make it at these top flight clubs. So, I mean, that is to me, that is very surprising. And I think definitely is something that we definitely need to get better at, especially with the World Cup coming and the opportunity to go to the Copa America and all that stuff, all these new opportunities because of what we've done in the past couple of years as players and as fan base as a country. I think that's something that we definitely need to work on. But obviously we can go a lot more into this, but from your long journey from obviously playing in York University to your studies and to giving all these conferences, all these talks and lectures at these conferences, what are like 5 things that you think stood out to you the most? And to add to that, what are the things that you think have helped develop the game in Canada?
Okay, yeah, so 5 things. So I guess the first thing is, it really opened my eyes the first time in my life, in my career, that I went to the World Congress on Science and Football. And so this was back in 2007. One of my best friends, who also was a graduate student, studying, doing some research in soccer and all that, we decided to go. It was in Turkey. in Antalya.
Mhm.
And this was like, so this Congress, it's done every 4 years in the year after the World Cup. And so it's the biggest soccer, it's actually science and football. So it has more than just soccer. They have even rugby and even, Australia rules football and Gaelic football and even American football. They have all research from all those sports, but it's mostly soccer. And Marcello Lippi was the keynote speaker there. Italy had just won the World Cup, and Fatih Terim was a keynote speaker. I mean, there were just top guys, people from Chelsea and Juventus and all over. And so it was just that experience really opened my eyes to how much knowledge was available out there for. Because I decided to specialize in sports science, but I'm a soccer guy. So these conferences were really awesome to me because they had lots of academics presenting research and all that, but they also had lots of coaches. So they were really bridging the gap, between science and practice on the field. That's what I've tried to do in my own career and with the courses that I teach. Because so the first thing, so it's like, okay, the information, everything was really, really high level. I learned a lot and I made lots of great friends and connections there. And then the other thing that stood out to me, and I'll say this was 2007 and all the way up until, the last Congress that I went to was last year in Portugal. So we're talking 2022, 15 years or whatever that is. Okay. I'm the only person from Canada, or myself and maybe a small group of only 2 or 3 of my friends and colleagues, the only ones ever from Canada that have attended any of these conferences. And I don't just attend. I've presented my research there and all that. We don't have anyone. We don't have any coaches that go. We don't have any other fitness coaches or sports scientists, even the ones that are, the Canadians that are working with, the professional, the national teams, whatever. Nobody's there. And yet, here's just one awesome example. So last year I was in Portugal. Now, I know you guys know about Portugal as a football nation. So they recently won a futsal World Cup. A few years before that, they won a European Championship. Their women's team has just qualified for the World Cup. So they're kind of, achieving success at all levels. And they are much more successful relative to their population and their GDP as lots of other, they're competing with big European nations that have 3 times the population and maybe more. So anyway, so they're a successful nation, but they are so critical of themselves. Like they're trying to find every little advantage that they can with any type of research, GPS and performance analysis, match analysis, fitness, physiology, sports psychology. One guy there who is actually one of the physiologists with the whole national team program, he told me, he literally said this to me. He said that winning the European Championship in 2016 was the worst thing that could have ever happened to Portugal. He said, because all of a sudden it made everybody think that they're the best, and then now they don't have to work as hard anymore in developing themselves. Imagine, and you're talking to a Canadian and you're saying that, right? It's like, these guys are some of the best in the world, right? And they are critical of themselves, and yet our supposedly top people, they can't even be bothered to attend these conferences. They're completely oblivious to it, completely oblivious. So it's like, I don't know. I guess I know you told me 5 things, but maybe I'm stuck on 2 or 3. But it's like there's just such a gap between where we are and where we could be. And it's, to be honest, as a person who's worked in the game for so long, it's very frustrating. What was the second part of your question again? I guess it was.
Oh, I was gonna say, how have you seen the game develop within Canada? Obviously, physically, here. Like back in the day, I guess the CPSL, it was more like a grown man's game, kind of like it was. Now you're seeing the game. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like rough. Like that's like any sport. Like NBA in the 80s was rough and tough. Like now the game's getting younger, but these kids, sometimes they come out, like, let's say, for example, Jordan Hamilton, when he was a kid, he was a physical specimen. But but they don't know, I'm not saying he doesn't, but like they don't know the importance of strength and conditioning. They just have the raw talent and they go about it in their own way. So like, how have you seen that development?
Very good question. And so I have 2 things that come to mind. The first would be, we've definitely improved and we can see the results, with a very talented group of men's players that qualified for a World Cup and they did great. Right? honestly, I thought they even did well in the tournament. I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, we lost. I mean, we outperformed one of the best teams in the world, and then we lost to Croatia. Like, it's like, of course we lost to Croatia. Like, anyway, but so we can't, and I can't be, naive and pessimistic and say that none of the changes that have happened over the last, 5, 10, 15 years in the game in Canada have played a part in the success of the men's team and the women's team, which already was good and lots of talent, but now are kind of breaking through, with a gold medal and, perhaps we'll see what happens at this tournament. But, in any case, things have improved. I think my comment would be, okay, so now we have the MLS academies, we have the CPL, we have now a new women's professional league. I'm not impressed at all with OPDL or anything, the standards-based league or whatever they say that there's standards, but the truth is there are no standards, and whatever standards they say there are either literally don't exist at all or are not being enforced, and nor are the people who are in charge competent or capable of enforcing them. So there's an issue with the youth development, but overall, the changes that have been made, and I think a lot of them, again, I mentioned MLS academies, kind of the higher level and options being provided to Canadian players have benefited. So we've improved. I'm just not so sure that we've improved relative to the rest of the world at the same rate that the other countries have improved. I'm very interested to see, because the women's game to me is very interesting. Like, we won a gold medal. We've been very successful. But our youth teams in the national program, they're not doing great. And some of them, performance-wise, were a little better, even 10 years ago. I mean, I know very well because I was involved 10 years ago. And so I'll be interested to see if the Europeans who are now developing the women's game more don't catch up and overtake us. And I'm not talking about some of them that are already as good as we are or better, like France and Germany, but maybe even, the Poland and Spain and Croatia, that have a more professional culture and professional environment and better coach education and all that. So we've improved, but I don't believe we've improved as much as everyone else or relative to the improvement that everyone else has improved. Okay. And the second thing that I think you're absolutely right, that, one of the overcorrections that we've made, and I'll speak about it from 2 points, from the physical part, but also from the psychological part, is we all probably could agree. Again, I know I'm older than you guys, but back in the day, there was a lot of, we can just say, probably even abuse, coaches yelling, screaming, swearing, the training was way too physically demanding. There was, too many games, too many tournaments. It was too much. And then there's even other stuff with sexual abuse with the women's game. And so there was a lot of problems, which absolutely needed to be addressed. So I think it's like, we could have found sort of a line, beyond which we've addressed the problems. We've got rid of the coaches that really don't belong. We've educated coaches better. But we still have to be demanding of players. We have to keep score. We have to keep standings. We have to reward those who perform better. We have to, we have to provide meaningful competition. We have to develop a strong work ethic. We have to develop discipline. We have to teach kids, especially those that are talented, to learn how to lose.
They got to work hard,
right? To learn how to work hard, to learn. And so what I'm saying is we've overcorrected, okay, to the point where now it's like, we go with this idea that, if you want to develop, then you can't win games. I mean, I'm telling you, you go to Europe, you go anywhere else in the world, they would laugh at you if you said that. They would say, no, we want to develop, of course. We're not going to win at the expense of development, but we want to be able to develop people who can win. Okay, and so there's a psychological aspect to that, which I think, honestly, players today are becoming a little bit softer psychologically. They're not able to handle the pressure,
criticism
as much. They're not able to handle criticism as much. You see a lot of entitlement among young players that didn't exist, and I think there's a happy medium. As I said, I don't think because players they have to be demanding of a certain standard, and I know there's disputes over pay and all that. Like, I get that, they should do that, but there's a way that I think you could be reasonable about it. And a lot of times now we have players, and even a lot of the parents of young players, who are very unreasonable. We have a lot of them in our business, so I know how it is. I mean, they don't they don't even accept it if a coach is critical of their child. They don't accept any, everything has to be positive, everything. I don't think that that's beneficial psychologically in the long term, because I think you lose a little bit of mental toughness and all of that physically now. And again, I'm going way into my wheelhouse here. Okay. I've talked about this. I've written articles about this. I have an article in the Canadian Journal of Strength and Conditioning, and it's also an article that I wrote for lots of other blogs and things called the overtraining myth. So and tell me if you guys have heard this. There's more injuries in youth soccer now because players are doing too much, right? That's what they say. They're training too much. They're overtraining.
They're training less.
So not only are they training less than kids used to train before and getting less exercise than before, the training they are doing is of such a low intensity, they couldn't possibly be overtraining. And I know that because I've tested over 10,000 youth soccer players and nobody is in shape. Nobody.
Damn.
So they can't be overtraining if they're not in shape. So the injuries are not coming because of overtraining. The injuries are coming because of undertraining. And part of this is from the coddling and all that. Part of it is from people, again, who don't have knowledge, but then they go and make rules. So they tell the coaches, no, 8 years old, no more than 3 practices a week, or no more than 2 practices and only 60 minutes. And it's like, listen, you can do, as you know, Kwame, you've done it. You can do a 20-minute workout in my facility, and it can be a very, very high load. You can be completely exhausted at the end of it. Or you could go and work with a coach that just talks all the time for 2 hours, and you had no training load at all. So coaches need to understand training load and periodization. They don't understand it because they're not taught, because the licensing and everything is incompetent. Okay. So they don't understand periodization. And what happens is the players are undertrained. And then when they have to go and play games, they're not ready. So they're not doing too much. They're doing too much too soon. If they were trained properly and the load was increased gradually. Listen, there are lots of teenage athletes in other sports, swimming, gymnastics, track and field. I know, Adam, we talked a little bit about that, who are by the time they're teenagers are getting to the point where they're training 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day.
Well, like the craziest thing that the craziest thing that you said there too, especially like when we talk about the not keeping score and all that stuff, like what's the most successful sport we have in this country? It's hockey.
That's right.
You gonna tell them to not keep score?
Immediately. And like even being in it now, like I'm in a youth role with my club here. Yeah. The kids are keeping score. Like just saying that, just like not having a standings, they're telling their team it's 6-0. Yeah. Like on the field. And don't get me wrong, like the coaches are going, guys, just no, hey, win this half. Who cares? We scored 6 goals in the first half. Hey, second half, we got to win this one. Like that's kind of like the way the coaches have gone, which is great. But it's like, okay, we have this model that has been so successful, and we're not going to use it. It's insane. But then the second thing is, and I really like what you said, where you're like, we've definitely improved, but not at the rate of other nations. And for me, like I think this is part of one of the constraints that we are forever going to have here, unfortunately. And it's A, population, and B, the money side of it. Like if you look at and realistically, the increase in what the MLS teams have done has been fantastic. That's subsidized by MLS though. Like those clubs have a valuation of $500 million, not because of any Canadian viewer. That is strictly because of US soccer.
States. Yeah.
So that's a huge part of that, where it's amazing that, and again, that's why those players are at a different standard. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why. Are those clubs going to get it right 1,000? Are they going to bat 1,000? Never. They're never going to get it right. They're going to slip through the cracks. That's why CPL is so big. That's why U Sports and the NCAA are so important still.
Yeah,
the money side of it, where even when we talk about, again, like for me, like the person that who I've grown up with, and I still love whenever I get to have a session as an adult player, Dale Mitchell, coach national team, all these things. I don't think, and this is my honest opinion, how much money are the CSA going to have to pay him to go run those courses? Do they even have the money? So this is like the catch-22 and almost the flip side of it, because I 100% agree with everything you're saying, and it's not taught properly. And I've been hearing that, and don't get me wrong, I've been hearing this for years. Everyone who knows I'm hearing it for years. But the flip side of it is, who is actually going to teach it, and how much money are they going to get? How much time do they have to invest and take away from other things if they don't? Like the money side of it, I think is so key, and we can't we have to kind of look at that as a constraint.
Yeah.
But
You're right.
but the education needs to get a lot better. Like
Yeah.
that is the biggest gap. And again, for me on the European side of it, we look at the French and the English who have just shot up out of nowhere. I don't think that's because of their federations. That's PSG funding it. That's the Man Uniteds, the Arsenals,
Okay.
the Chelseas, the cities.
Yeah.
Like they're the ones primarily funding that, and they've almost got away with it because they're all worth over $1 billion, and they're the ones kind of feeding their national team, which we're never gonna have here. Like women's professional league, amazing. Oh my God, great step. That's not gonna help solve that issue. It's painting over a crack. It's not fixing the foundation that we have to. Right. And that, like, it's the youth side of it that you talked about. That is the part that is the scariest.
Yeah.
Is going, there's a lot of countries catching up on the youth side.
Yeah. And I want to comment because there's a few things you said that stood out to me. So the first is, like, again, if we had better coach education, then we would be able to develop coaches that can teach the children that they work with how to put winning and losing into its proper perspective. Because the whole ideology around, not keeping score and all of that is simply like the
spare feelings.
It's about making the assumption that if a kid loses too many games, they're gonna not be able to handle it. They're gonna be, they're gonna want to quit the sport. No. If that's the reaction that kids have to losing, that is because the coach, the leadership, right, has not instilled in those kids the ability to put winning and losing into perspective. Okay. And I say winning and losing because we also don't want them to get, an overinflated ego if they win, and that's, again, comes from better coach education. So we don't have that. You mentioned about, how the kids already know and they keep score and all that, right? So here's the thing. I just can't remember the author of the study, but it's a very famous psychological study, which is about praise and the kind of praise that you give to children. And it was done with very young children, kindergarten. So they took these children and they gave them tasks that they knew that were challenging, but they knew the children could do. And when the children completed the tasks, these are like 4-year-old kids, right? Half of them were given the kind of praise where they were praised for their effort. And the other half were given the kind of praise where they were sort of told almost that they had some kind of an inherent gift, like, oh, you must be really smart, or you're a genius, that kind of thing. So the type of praise, and this is directly applicable to coaching, right? Ultimately, in the long run, those children who were praised because of effort, they showed much better results on subsequent tests. Why? Because they developed, again, the perspective and the connection between if I work hard, if I push myself, that's how I get better. Whereas the others who were praised because of, again, they almost made the assumption that they have some kind of genetic gift and they're just superior, right? Those ones,
when they fail,
they don't
like,
handle
oh,
it.
damn, I'm not smart anymore.
Okay, so this is, and guys, this study, like, this is from the 1990s. Okay, so we've known this for a very long time. Okay, it's to me, it's like just the wrong mentality.
Well, it's funny that you say it's from the kindergartens, like that was in the 90s, and then growing up, it was, oh no, when you get to high school, you get hit, and then after that, when you go to university, you're gonna get like you're preparing, and now it's like, oh, we're preparing you for after university, and you're like, it's so fucking late. How is someone supposed to cope with life when they're 22? If you've just coddled them for 22 years and now you throw them into competing to live.
But why do you think like the best footballers in the world have come from like the toughest backgrounds? I feel like when you just have to be coping with it, they got nothing to lose, and they've always been rewarded based on their hard work or based on them not giving up.
Well, the other side of it is
addition to their talent
to stay out of that, though. Like they're spending all day somewhere to not be around that. And that's kind of like, it's funny, like it's kind of the same thing. Cause like, even strangely enough, like looking at the NBA now, where you're like, hey, they're better athletes. They have way better training, yet guys are pulling muscles more than they did in like the 80s and 90s. And I read something, I don't know how, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is fact, because I'm the last.
You gotta get the chat. You gotta get the Chad Ochocinco down.
But part of it was what they found was young kids now who are teenage basketball players, they're playing on softer courts, so it's not as hard all the time. Whereas when you look at that group that came through the 80s and 90s, they were on pavement and cement, and all they did was play at that level. So like their bodies were used to certain stresses, whereas now with how physically stressful and how much force you need to actually generate to play in the NBA now, training on these soft courses stuff doesn't cut it.
It's like the undertraining that I'm talking about, right?
Exactly. It's just not. It's like, oh, we're trying to save your body, and it's based in science, but it's like it's like that catch-22 of going, okay, we're trying not to make sure that you have these arthritis in your knees from playing on pavement, and being smacked down by older people. But like that's how those guys got to the like.
And there's a happy medium, as I said. I mean, we can look at what actually overtraining is, and we can say, but honestly, guys, like there are very, very few footballers in the world who are overtrained. Okay, one of my best friends is the fitness coach with Club America in Mexico, which is one of the top clubs in Mexico and North America, right? I mean, we talk a lot. I mean, he kind of laughs sometimes. Again, the CPL is a great league. It's so important for Canadian players, but the season is literally half the number of games that those Mexican guys are getting. Half. Okay, we aren't going to compete long term. Like we did great this year, even outplayed the Mexicans. Fantastic, right? But historically, it's like, they're tough competition for us. And part of it is because they're coming up in that league with better coaching, with better fitness training, with a more, a longer season, more games, more experience, all of it, right? They're benefiting from all of that. And I mean, it's not like we haven't improved. And again, I believe there is a happy medium, but I think we've really gone way too far overcorrecting. I want to comment on the money side of it. And actually it ties into even, what you said about players that are maybe, coming from, whether it's a disadvantaged background or a rough background or whatever. So there's an excellent book called Soccernomics. I don't know if you guys have seen this book or did you read it? Or
I'm gonna write it down.
I haven't read. I haven't read. I've read different excerpts. So
these are not my ideas. So it's Simon Cooper and Stefan Szymanski are the guys that wrote it. So it's an economist, Szymanski, and Simon Cooper, who's one of the most famous soccer journalists in the world. And so it's really an awesome book. And they do talk about so like the basic idea in the club game anyway is that almost 90% of the variance in the league position, so what place your team finishes, almost 90% of it is predicted by player salaries in all of the top European leagues. So what does that mean? That means that when you have more money, you can buy better players, and when you buy better players, you win more. Now, take that argument into the staff and the coaching, and like you said about Adam, about ultimately, okay, fine. There are budget constraints and there are, whatever there are, right? Fair enough. But at some point, whoever is the decision maker, I mean, look what we just did to the women's team. I mean, my gosh, we just cut funding right before the World Cup. I mean, it's like, okay, at some point, these people need.
That's a great segue. That's a great segue.
No, because if you invest in coaches and you hire better coaches and better coach educators, yes, you have to pay them more. You have to do that. But if you do, you're going to get a much better result. And I don't know what to say. Yeah, we can segue into that because that's
I mean, we talked about it. I think we talked about it on our last podcast. And like for me, I don't like to really talk about situations that I'm not personally involved in. And it's kind of tough because it's everything's he says, she says. But I just wish that me and Adam came to the conclusion like, I wish both sides can just get to the table and find a happy medium. Just like
it was announced. So it was announced today that they did sign an interim deal like they did with the men. So that's great. But I mean, it's interim.
Painting over the cracks.
Also, it's painting over the cracks again, man. And like again, like part of the issue that I've seen again with all of this is, I mean, even before that, like the women's trip to Brazil, like they needed private funding for it. Like there's a huge issue with the money that's available right now. Like there's a massive issue with it. And so
my question is, where's it like everyone? Because I think it was Janine Becky who commented saying like, oh, we're saying, oh, there's no money, like women's don't sell tickets or whatever, this and that, and like people don't watch the games. Like if that's your only reason to say why we shouldn't get paid, then you're insane. Like you're fucked up basically. And I'm like, you know what, maybe she does have a point, because I was harping on revenue and stuff like that, but like, it's like almost like an investment. In order to make money, you have to spend money. So if you
And
want
so like
to
the
put out
problem
a,
is, do they have money though? Like if they've needed private funding to get the women on certain trips, which has come out, Rick Westhead wrote about that, said that multiple trips now they need to go outside CSA and go to private funding. That's a fucking massive issue, man. Like that, I don't care who the president is. That is catastrophic.
I would
it comes down to the president, who's a secretary, who's a treasurer, who's all those people that accountants.
And the decision about how the money is being spent. And again, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I'm not so sure that a lot of the people that are working in our provincial and national associations and are being paid quite well are there because they really deserve it and are really the most competent or best person for the job, nor do I think they care. So the money that we do have, I think, could be spent much better. And also, and again, this isn't me, right? This is soccernomics, right? Okay. But basically, if we're going to talk about revenue and, the club game it's very, very clear. Okay. Almost all professional clubs, male and female, lose money. Almost all of them. There's Manchester United and maybe some of the lower tier, but first like top league, but lower tier top league European clubs that have very good academies that develop players and sell them, make money. Everyone else loses. And so essentially, and it's good that we don't have, total financial equality or all of that, because if we did, then we'd never have, you said it, Adam, that France and all that has really benefited since PSG was purchased by these, wealthy guys. Why? Because now there's more money in the French game. The young French players now get to test themselves against Neymar and Mbappe and those guys, and it helps them. And so the idea is that in the women's game, they probably, the revenue will never be what it is on the men's side, but they're getting better and getting more fans and all that. But it doesn't matter. In the end, if there were people who wanted to invest, because the guys that the millionaires and the big corporations that own the big clubs, the men's side, they're losing a ton of money, but they want to be there because they want to go to the stadium and wear a suit.
The experience,
it's the valuation that it gives them, which allows them to borrow more.
It helps them. It raises their profile. So if there were, I think some people in the women's game need to take a chance and do that and invest. And they're going to lose money. But listen, guys, the people that own the CPL clubs are losing money.
They're losing money.
So this, Richard, let me ask you this. All right. So obviously we all talk about this. We're losing money. Yeah. CSB is the only company that's jumped in and is losing hand over fist. Right? Like they are. Now we're based on the deal they have with the CSA. Everyone's saying we got to get them out, throw them out, all this stuff. The only people who have even remotely tried to invest in this country ever, like significantly, how like for any other investor who wants to come in, we talk about we need investment. If this goes through and we cut ties, say they gets X'd, all this stuff, what investors, like, do you think any other investor is going to want to jump in when you sit there and they go, we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to lose fucking money, but we're putting in a clause where we can recoup some of our losses. Like, don't get me wrong. It definitely binds and it ties the hand of the CSA, which again, I'm sure that they'd love to have some of that money back. I'm sure they would.
That's a tough one for sure. And honestly, like, I don't know the details of the deal that they made and whatever. I mean, it's funny, actually, I was on a podcast last week and talking to John Molinaro, journalist, and he was saying that the deal that was made, I know this, that it was made back in, I guess, 2018 or something, when national team on the men's side was kind of struggling, had just lost in the Gold Cup, and the women's team hadn't really reached the success level that they had in the last few years, and so maybe they didn't really think ahead as much or whatever. But I don't know. You're right. I don't know. But I would say perhaps if CSB, if that relationship is cut, I don't know who's going to step in. It might be worse. It might be better to try to keep the CSB, but I don't know, expand however they can. I don't know. Again, not an economist, right? But
Yeah. It definitely sounds like a tough situation, and obviously prayers to everyone, all those involved, because it's definitely tough for you to be a professional athlete at the top of your game and believe in your heart of hearts that like we deserve, like there's a standard that we set. Like these girls won two. If you're Christine Sinclair, what, 2 bronze medalists and a gold medal? Like you set a standard where it's like you are the best country or top 3 countries in this sport for 12 years, essentially, right? So it's like, okay, or let's say top 6. And it's like, where do we need to be in order to get that same type of standard? And I don't know if it's asking for equal pay, but it's just asking for the bare, not even a minimum, like just the standard has to be professional standards, like what the men
respect.
get. Like
I would
Completely
ask
agree
for
with you.
yeah,
respect.
just the
Completely
respect.
agree.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just a typical, like if they need a charter flight, it shouldn't be a hassle for them to get a charter flight. If they need XY, like to go into different tournaments, if they need to do like go different experience, you know what I mean? Like recovery, all that stuff, anything that the men have that is supposed to be part of a professional structure, I think the women should have 110%.
100%.
I agree.
100%. I think like the
So
interesting
the fact
thing
that,
there too.
yeah,
Like the interesting thing there too is, again, this is where I think we have to kind of understand it with our country, is like whatever the men's standards are, that's their standard. Like
yeah,
without
that's a
a doubt.
standard across
But
the board.
We can't look at now, like this is the flip side of it though, and this is the harder part now, especially on, I think it's actually on both, with more women now going to Europe and playing and more.
Mhm.
Yeah, the facilities and things here aren't going to be the same as they are at Bayern Munich. They're not going to be the same they are as Man United, like with with Adriana Leon. Like you guys aren't getting those standards, so don't fucking ask for them. Like we don't have.
You have to know what country you are. You have
You're
to know
not,
what country
so
you're
that like
into.
Croatia's training stuff isn't the same as England's. Like Luka Modric isn't complaining about that, right? So like we have to understand like what our restraints are, and if it's too big of a stretch to get there for the women or the men, then you can't do it. Then you can't, if you can't do it for one of them, you can't do it for both. So let's make sure we understand what the standard is. What's the bare minimum that both get? And like that is so fundamental though. Like that's fundamental. And the bigger issue is that that's not like that. We're talking about these with our senior national teams. What the fuck are we doing with the youth ones?
Oh,
are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
I've heard it from youth national team players this past year going, I didn't meet my teammates till a week before the tournament.
4 days before the tournament.
A week before. I had someone who was coaching going, we didn't even have our kit until we got down there. And even then we were short.
Yeah.
Like,
and so like at some point, you know, again, if we expect to be competitive, an investment, a standard needs to be set. It's not being set. I mean, it's been a while since I worked with youth national teams. It's been almost 10 years or so. But what I can tell you is, I don't think it's changed much. Here's a good anecdote that so the coaches are basically paid only for the days that they're away. Okay, and they're away for a 10-day camp, a 25-day camp, whatever, right? So and you're not paid. It's maybe $150 a day, maybe $200 a day. Like this is not a living wage if you add up all the days, and it's not even close. So what does that mean? That means that you have to have another job that pays the bills, but you still have to tell that job, oh, in March I'm going to be gone for 10 days, and I was able to do it because I had my business, but I sacrificed my business to do it. The other coaches, a lot of them, they were a college coach or something, and they were, because the college saw the value in the coach. One guy was with the Montreal Impact Academy, but like we were forced as coaches to scramble just to make ends meet. We never were able to give it our all because we weren't full time.
Yeah,
and I honestly, guys, you don't want to know what I was paid with TFC, Ottawa Fury, all that. It's like at some point, what happens is people, myself, I can use myself as an example, but there's dozens of others. You get a little older, you have a family, you get, and then you stop doing this work. We get not even fed up. Fed up is part of it, but you can't. You literally cannot. Like I can't. When I was single, I literally hired a manager in my business and I moved to Ottawa, and I worked for $30,000 with the Ottawa Fury. Fine, you can do those things when you're younger and when you're single. You can't do that when you have to support a family. So what happens? The smarter, older, more experienced coaches leave, and they go and hire people that are inexperienced and and the
incompetent.
cycle
Yeah,
repeats itself.
and
That's just on the coaching
it's
side.
just vicious. It's vicious. Like, and again, that comes down to investment, man. Like that's the part of me that really finds it hard to sit there and stomach it as a fan. Because again, from the fan perspective, we're the reason that all this is happening. Like the reason CSB came in, Rogers and on TV because it wouldn't sell. Like, and that's both men's and the women's. And that comes down to the fans. We're the ones who weren't willing to tune in and take time out of our day or pay for it. Like, that's on us. That's not on the players. That's on us. Like, we weren't willing to do it. So those companies who are in the business of making money, we're not willing to invest because we can't sell the ad space. So like it's this vicious cycle. And now that we have someone who's coming in and invest, and now we want to kick them out.
I know.
No, like, you can't have it both ways. And the problem is, and again, I think the bigger problem is that we're looking at the situation as it is now and going, it should be here. It's fucking not.
Yeah, that's right.
We have to, and again, this is the thing. We have a new president. Great. She's been on the board how long? A long time. She's a little bit entrenched in what's been going on, number one. But number two, I also think she's, as far as people who understand the situation, she clearly understands the situation, which is great. Like you need someone who's probably got their hands a little bit, like you do, to understand. Again, I want someone who knows how to run a fucking business. Like I like not someone who's never done it before, has no idea, but hey, they're an ex-national team player. I don't want them in there. Like, you need someone who understands what the problem is, but from the inside. Like, you actually do, unfortunately.
But think about it.
Someone to fix the foundation. Like a new president. Think about it. That's painting a crack.
But think about it like this. It's like you don't hire a plumber to do your taxes. So like, why would you hire someone? Like, why would you hire someone if you're talking about money? If the issue is money, why would you hire ex-national team player to try to fix the situation that has to do with money? Where's the lawyers? Where's the accountants? Where's that's why like when they were asking more money. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's why when Christine Sinclair and those women were asking for like the papers, like to show like receipts and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, where is the money going? You guys are saying you have no money. Okay, fair enough. You have no money, but where is the money going? But if you hire people that are not specific to those tasks, you might have to spend more money, but like you'll always have an ongoing issue. Unless the CSA don't care about the ongoing issue, then this is going to be a conversation that's forever going to keep going. But my thing is, like, we have players that are playing in Europe and they come from a specific standard. And then we have a talk in Canada soccer saying like, oh, we have players here. But when they come back, I'm not saying the players that play from in PSG and those stuff and places, and they go back to like Argentina or they go back to Colombia, Bolivia, whatever, they have better facilities than their club teams, but they're held to a specific standard as well. They know what they're getting into. And because I think Canada's like, hey, because those guys are consistently at those top clubs, when they come to Canada and it's only for a 10-day period, like, oh, they can manage it for a 10-day period. So they don't have to change anything. But whereas Argentina, I watched a documentary of Argentina, the Copa America, they spent like a month and a half with each other at the Argentina facility, playing futsal, doing all these different things because they had the resources to do it. I'm not saying they had the best, like you see the field. The field's not the best field, but they're happy to be together. They know who they're going to be playing with for a month before. They build camaraderie and all that stuff. Those are the tangibles that a lot of people don't know that can benefit a national team. And there's no reason for a team like a country like Argentina who went bankrupt in 2001, filed for bankruptcy. Don't get me wrong. Yes, they have better players historically, but they don't have more money than Canada in general. So it's like, what's going on here? Something's being lost.
I want to comment about, again, my time in Uruguay, and they're a very interesting case study, as is Portugal and Croatia. Uruguay, they're situated right between Brazil and Argentina, and they have a very small population, but they're very successful. I mean, it's been a while since they won a World Cup, but they did win World Cups, and they've been successful in the Copa America. They have very good coaches that even work in other countries, and some top players. So it was really, and it's a poor country. It's a small, poor country. Okay, so professionalism doesn't just mean money. Okay, because I mean, I don't know, call me if you see the picture on my facility there, but on the wall, like I was with a second division club. Fair enough. Some of the first division clubs have nicer fields and stuff, but we trained on a field that barely, it wasn't even grass, honestly. It was like half grass, half dirt, whatever. Okay. You know, we had an equipment manager who was a guy that owned a bar near the stadium, and his son was on the team. I mean, it's all this kind of stuff that, you know, he used to go to a gas station before every practice and buy 2 big jugs of water and, you know, and plastic cups. And this was it. We had cones and balls and nothing else. But professionalism is about, first of all, you know, that the coaches, again, are competent, are well-trained, that the players live in a professional way, that they're not coddled or spoiled. I mean, because I worked with the club, with the first team, but also with the academy. And this was really interesting because it was literally right after I had worked with the TFC academy. And they've got lots of money at TFC. But the players there are treated like superstars from the time that they're 13 years old and they get identified. They come to the academy, they get free food from a gourmet chef, free boots. They finish training, they take their clothes off and they put it in a laundry basket and someone else does their laundry. These are 13, 14-year-olds. They've accomplished nothing in football.
That's crazy.
Right?
I used to bring my dirty clothes home and have to do laundry myself.
Okay. And in Uruguay, they give you a t-shirt at the beginning of the year and that's your t-shirt and you wash it yourself. You don't have any status or entitlement or, you know, and again, these are little things, but they add up. Okay. To me, the professionalism in a poor country like Uruguay was much better than in a wealthy country like Canada. We don't have as much investment as the United States. Fair enough. We don't have as much investment as some of these big European nations. Yes, that's true. We don't. But in our own region, if you take the United States out of it and Mexico, we have a much better funded national team program than any of the other CONCACAF countries. And it isn't even close. And again, I'm comparing to Uruguay, which is a different place.
Do you think that comes down to do you think that comes down to culture?
Yes.
So like from that perspective, like again, like if you look at, again, okay, we don't have the investment. We also don't have the population that the US has. Like the US has got away with it because of population, let's be real. But if you look at those other countries, like say, take the French and the UK, like what their PSG's youth team does, they ain't doing their laundry either. But it's almost like, well, we're on the same we're on the same level as them from a societal standpoint. So we have to treat them the same way, where it's almost like from the cultural side of it, from a footballing perspective, we're not even fucking close, but we're going to treat you like you're at that level because from a societal standpoint, we have to. So we haven't actually developed the culture to get a club to that level. Like we said, the 3 MLS clubs are beneficiaries of US soccer. That's why they have those things. But if you look at like and again, like people wonder how can Uruguay do it? Go down there and watch. How can Argentina do it? All these kids, they grow up with the best pitches possible. They're pristine. All the turf fields now, they're all pristine. They're all in. Wait, we have to play on grass. Oh, there's some dirt. What about gravel? I grew up training on gravel. No complaints about it. Never once complained.
You don't have you complain when you're given an opportunity to complain, and when the complaints that you make are responded to. So, you know, again, it goes back to the kind of the coddling and all that. But you said culture, absolutely. So back to soccernomics, and again, it's just, again, these are not my ideas, but I'm just repeating them. But in the national team environment, you know, they've got a very good statistical model that I mean, it's able to predict. It depends on the factors, but like they can predict maybe 50-60% of the variance in the performance of national teams based on population, gross domestic product, the strength of the economy, and football experience, which is the number of international games that the national teams have played. So Argentina, Uruguay, and South America had an advantage because they had a national federation very early. England had a huge advantage initially. And eventually even Italy, France, and, you know, right? Other countries have caught up, and, you know, Brazil overtook. But, you know, why did Brazil overtake some of the other countries? Perhaps population, you know, because they had all the, you know, the football crazy people, just like Argentina and all that, but they have, you know, more population. The United States has probably overperformed based on their population because they don't have the culture and the experience and all that. So, but I almost think, you know, if we take those 3 factors out, which are population, GDP, and football experience, culture, it's hard to quantify it, you know, but we kind of know it when we see it, you know. and we don't have that here. So yeah,
Well, it was kind of like when the Suarez biting incidents,
yeah,
where you're like, how can you do that?
or the
'Cause
handball, right?
Because he wants to fucking win that badly. Because if he doesn't, he's still in Uruguay. He doesn't get out. Like that's but it wasn't like in order for him, and that's the other side that again, Kwame knows this now, but I went through this when I went on trial in England and stuff. Was because he got out, someone else didn't. Someone else got stuck there.
Yeah.
Like he took someone else's job, and they understand that.
100%. And I think that's what. And when I got to, I think that's when I got to New York City FC. I realized like it's a dog eat dog world. Like, yeah, you're trying to win something together, but it definitely, you're taking money out of someone else's pocket who they have to fend for their family. Yeah, this is MLS, but for a team like New York, we had a lot of guys that came from Europe, a lot of European guys, a lot of South American guys, probably had like 6-7 North American guys out of a 28-man roster. So everyone else either didn't speak English or came from a high level where like, this is all they know. This is all they've done for their whole life. The one thing that I like essentially was that like when you were talking about what was it like how Canada and France and stuff like that, it was, I think we're forgetting about the competitive aspect of it as well. I mean, yeah, and it stems from culture as well, because the taxes and social, everything is like, you worry about the same things in those countries that you worry about in Canada. Of course, like cost of living, taxes, all that stuff.
It's a Western country, right?
It's a Western country. So like, but when you come get down to it, they're not bombarded with sports that like the NBA, NFL, like, like football, American football, basketball. Like, don't get me wrong, they played in those countries, but soccer is their primary sport, their national sport. So like when they get to 16, they either decide to go to school or try to continue on with the soccer thing. Here, obviously because of the weather and the extreme snowfall and stuff like that, like we are forced to do something else. Luckily enough for me, like growing up, we had like indoor soccer leagues, we had futsal and all that stuff. So we're playing soccer year round, but it's not the consistent 11v11 that some of those countries are playing at a 24/7 basis. Then when you add the coaching on top of it, and like there's just so much that's piled on top of it that just puts us at a way far back, even though we're improving, like you said, at the same rate, those guys improving, we're all getting the same technology, but we've been held back for so long with incompetent coaching and incompetent leadership at the highest level that like now that we have guys like Alphonso Davies, like we should have had guys like Alphonso Davies, but we didn't have coaches to develop a guy like Alphonso Davies. Like Dwayne De Rosario wasn't no scrub. But
no, I wouldn't give him the fastest a sprinter.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying physical aspect. I'm saying soccer, just soccer.
I think maybe you're trying to say we had talent.
Yeah.
It wasn't developed.
Yeah, it wasn't refined. It wasn't refined.
Yeah.
It
Not
wasn't
exactly
refined and stuff like that. Yeah. Like those other Atiba Hutchinson, like he had to leave. You know what I mean? So like those guys go and like you cannot get mad at players, especially on the women's side, for them going to these big clubs where you want them to be, where they have to be. But hold on.
Yeah.
Where they have to be. And then when they come back and they're asking you to meet those standards because these are the standards of the best in the world. And then you're looking at them like, yeah, about that. It's like you're using me for what I've done, where I've been and all that stuff, but you can't even meet me at the standard that helps me perform at this level. And I think that is the predominant issue.
Yeah, I think honestly, there's nothing wrong with if we have our most talented players and they are capable of playing in the best leagues in the world, like Alphonso Davies, go. Great, but we need to try to raise our standard too, because there's only so many of them that can go, and so many. Not all clubs want Canadians anyway. They're not 100%. We're not a real popular nation to take talent from. So,
Interestingly too, like I wonder if this is kind of a flip side of it, because at the youth level too, right? Like I think one thing, and Kwame, you touched on it based on competitiveness and how competitive it is. If Man United have a kid who's been in their academy since he was 12 years old, he's now 18, and they see a kid who's better, they'll cut him.
Yeah, they did that to Jack Harrison, but he ended up going. He had to come here and go to MLS.
Right,
Back at
exactly.
Leeds,
That doesn't happen at the Whitecaps, TFC, or Montreal. They don't go out and watch. And if there's a kid better, they no, we're gonna be loyal. Are you fucking kidding me?
No,
You guys,
there's no
like,
such
we're
thing.
not
Yeah,
expecting,
that's
like,
it.
A, there's no such thing. B, you cannot bat 1,000. You can't pick a kid at 12 and nobody's gonna be like, he's a 12-year-old. You don't know what he's gonna be like tomorrow. Never mind, at 18 years old.
Takes
Like,
a lot of opportunities away.
So
And then you look at some guys that were in TFC Academy, you're like, what happened to these guys? They were in TFC Academy, not getting any better, and it took away opportunities from guys that you're like, damn. Like, look at guys like me, Richie, Kyle, Larry. Like,
Kamal.
Kamal. Like, we never got, like, those guys. We never got national team opportunities until we got hit the pros. We didn't get no youth national team. Yeah. We didn't get, like, they had to. And I'm gonna tell you a story because I know Rob Gale. I don't know if he listens or anything like that, but this was absolutely insane. I went to UConn with Kyle. His freshman year, he was considered going top 3 in the draft, Generation Adidas. 14 goals, 3 assists, didn't go. His second year, he got his national team, first national team cap against Columbia in Hartford, and he didn't have the same year. He had 10 goals, 2 assists, but at the same time, because of 24 goals in 2 seasons in college is a big deal, especially at that time. He goes number 1. They weren't even going to call him to the U20 qualifications. They had to call him because it wouldn't have made any sense to anyone in the public eye as to why Kyle Larin, the number 1 draft pick, going to Orlando City, Generation Adidas, was not on the U20 national team, and he didn't start. So it's stuff
fucking
like
insane,
that.
man.
It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why do you? Yep. There's so many guys that were on that team that fell off.
Coach education and coach development, a branch off of that is scouting. And honestly, because I've been through it, I might say we have the worst scouting here that I've ever seen. There's not. I mean, it is nepotism.
Well,
and on top of that, there's all of these players that go under the radar. Here's just a simple one from my wheelhouse, which is developmental age. Now, kids, we all know, don't develop at the same rate. 14-year-old teams, there's bigger, smaller, whatever. You can, and it's a free test. It's not expensive. It's nothing. All you need to do is measure the player's height standing, height sitting. You need to know the height of the chair they're sitting on, and you need to know their weight and their sex, male or female. And with that information, there's a simple algorithm where you can calculate their developmental age. And you could then do that with all academies, TFC, all of them, even the amateur clubs. And you could, within each of those teams, you could group them according to developmental age rather than chronological age. And if you did that, you would find that typically there's a range of about 3 years. Everybody's 14, but some developmentally are only 12 and some developmentally are 15.
When I was 14, I was definitely
scouting.
12.
Right. Yeah, no, but it is. It's a common knowledge, right? So you talk about scouting and player identification. Nobody in Canada, not in the youth national teams, not in the MLS academies, and nowhere near in any of the clubs is doing any of this. I teach it in my course. I did it when I was at TFC and before that with the provincial program. And I've been talking about it honestly since I'm blue in the face. People, again, we don't even have the people in charge here in Ontario that even understand it. So there is no way it's ever
identify it. Shit, they can select it. It's talent selection.
Oh yeah, and guys, honestly, like everyone knows that Messi is the best player, and we watch and we can pick him out. That's easy. Christine Sinclair, easy. But that's not what scouting is. Scouting is making decisions between players that are very similar. One's a little quicker, but the other is better with crossing, whatever, right? Like these are things that require, a very analytical mind, which is developed again in coach licensing and in a culture where there are clubs that have a history, that know what they're doing about scouting, that teach others how to do it. They have a system. Guys, we have nothing. You know how you get into the provincial program? It's
trust me.
Hey, bro, you got to see my player. He's the best. Oh, okay, bro. Okay, that's how it happens.
Yes, it is. It's word of mouth. It's 100% word of mouth. I used to be when I first got to the provincial
based on
team.
3 programs.
Yeah.
That's what it
There
is.
you go.
When I got to the provincial team, obviously, I don't know how it is in BC, but obviously Ontario has a bigger population, especially the GTA. It's a melting pot. But when I got to provincial team my first year, they invite 55 players. Out of all the players that I played with at Sigma, Richie was there, Kyle was there, Chris Nanko was there. None of them I was the only one that got selected. And I knew in my heart of hearts, I was never the best player on any of the teams that I played on. But I'm like, why did I get selected? So I felt like it was a big thing my first year. But then I'm playing with guys, ego, the coaching staff is like, oh, I'm pushing this guy more forward than this guy. Rob, and then like we go to like tournaments, stuff like that. I get injured my first year. And then my second year, I just quit the provincial program. I'm like, I don't think I'm getting better as a player. So from a young age, I knew already like what I wanted and what I wanted to get better at. Shout out to Canadian SC Uruguay, Toronto Uruguay. Growing up and playing with them when you played in futsal.
That's the club I worked with, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
You know that, right?
Yeah. So like, I used to go to the club that they had, like they had their own club where they had all the trophies, Spanish League trophies. I know that. I know it very well. So like, going from there, developing at a really young age, like 6, 7, and I was playing with like Richie, Christian, Samaniego, all those guys. Then you go to provincial, then you realize like this is not the type of football that I want to be playing. Physically, I was at the same level, but we weren't getting better. We were literally just dominating games. Like we went to Spain and we got destroyed. We played against Villarreal. They balled us off the field, but we won 3-0. Why? We sat back and counterattacked. We didn't get anything from that game. We played against Catalonia and we got destroyed 3-1. And it was like when we had met someone at our match physically, like we didn't know how to handle it. So then as I got older, 15, 16, and I went back to Sigma, I was like, there's a big difference between what I was getting at provincial team and the high class or the appreciation. Oh my God, you're on the provincial team stuff. I'm like, I didn't really care because the status, like, I didn't really care because then once I left, I felt myself actually getting better as a player. And the guys that were on the provincial team, I can tell you a lot of guys that are on the provincial team now either went somewhere and fell off or we're back at the same place that I was at. So our paths were different, but because they had status and then obviously going into college was a frowned upon when it came to those guys are going to TFC Academy and I was a Sigma and I went to university. So like just looking at that, it's like I don't like the developmental side is definitely different. Who would have thought certain guys that are playing right now would it be playing in the World Cup? Where you thought like, when you were like 14, 15, like, this guy's the best player I've ever seen. And then you see them now and you're at a higher level than them. You're like, what in our time frames, what changed? Sometimes it could be something personal, but like what soccer specifically, what changed? Like, what did I do that got me? And sometimes it is luck, but what got me here and what slowed him down? What got him from, I can use Fraser Aird, for example, got him from Rangers, Canadian national team, all the way back to CPO at Calgary or at Edmonton. You know what I mean? So like, I'm just looking at it in those ways. And you're right, the development side, like some people don't develop at the same rate. And it's not unfortunate, it's just a matter of, do you have coaches that are there that are going to be, okay, right, I can see the potential in this guy, but how do I bring it out of him the most?
The irony of all this is that the league in Ontario is called the Player Development League.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. it's crazy, and that's why provincial is obsolete now. We all realize it's like, okay, that's some BS. Like, I don't need that status, and especially at those critical ages, like 13 to 17, where like you're really learning the game, you're learning to start film, you're learning to do gym sessions, you're learning the importance how to be a pro, all that stuff. Like the provincial program, don't get me wrong, they gave us the resources, but they were just like, here.
Yeah.
Go play with
and
like, it's like, you know what I mean?
The thing that bothers me too is like I listened to so many stories. Like I was lucky enough to go to SFU, and when I was very, 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 very young, and when my dad was going, when he was a pro and stuff, like we were lucky in BC, the fact that Leonard Doozy lived in BC. So the national program was in BC essentially. But what they used to have is like the old NTC and the provincial program. It was you got invited weekly. It wasn't,
Mhm.
hey, you signed with the provincial team, you're coming with us for 6 months. It was, you had to wait, and you might not get emailed some weeks or called
Yeah.
some weeks, and then you get it other weeks. And they'd always invite them up to SFU. You'd play against national team guys who are in the national team pool, but they'd bring in guys constantly different, like throughout a year or two. And that's how they created national team pools. And you're
Mhm.
kind of sitting there just going, how, like, that just seems so basic and so simple. Why did we go away from that? Like, that's just an easy way to do it. But that requires time and actually putting an effort and going and watching and going to do those things. And why would you do that when, well, I work for the Whitecaps or TFC or Montreal, and we have a higher standard, so you should just pick our players.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, we all play the exact same way because we're all managed.
There's no variety. So
No,
like,
there's
when
none.
I went to the provincial team, I had Jim Canavan. I don't know where he is right now, and Ian Skidge. Jim Canavan was like he came from like Everton, or I don't know. There was like some big story with Everton, whatever, and he played the football the big English way, the old school English way,
Old Sam.
4-4-2,
Big
old
Sam.
Sam, like 4-4-2, play it into the target, lay it off, whip it out wide, like wing backs, like wingers, cross it, early crosses, you know what I mean? Like, he didn't like guys that were flair players.
Yeah.
So whenever I was someone, I came from the Spanish league, but because I had the physical aspect as well, it was like, hey, and you're left footed, there's not that many left footers in the world like that. So it's like, hey, I can if I can make him do the physical demanding stuff, all right. But if I was to like do like a skill move or like dribble a guy and like play 1-2s, that was not what he wanted. He wanted me to go at a guy, cut left, whip it in. And I was like, it just became robotic. And then when I got to the first camp that me and Kyle got to, the U20s, I get into a meeting room with Rob Gill. He goes like, oh, so how are you? Like, how's everything at UConn? I got all NCAA, all rookie team, me and Kyle. We went to the semifinals, the quarterfinals at NCAA tournament. Kyle was projected to go number 1. And it was, he goes, yeah, he's like, how's your fitness? I mean, I'm like, I go, I mean, I just left a college season where I just finished doing a yo-yo test. And after that, it was like, he was like, oh, okay, all right, sounds good. He's like, by the way, it might be tough for you to make the team if you're not like playing at a professional academy. I'm like, so why'd you call me into the camp?
Why'd you waste
like,
my time?
Don't waste time. Yeah, don't waste my time. So it was one of those. But yeah, I know you want to head out soon. This has been a very this has been a very very, very acknowledging. Like, we definitely probably have to do a part 2.
Yeah, or else we're gonna have a glass of wine or something.
Yeah, 100%. Nah, 100%. But like, before you go, questions. I wanna actually 3. Is there anyone? Are you like currently mentoring other people who have the same aspirations as you?
Yeah.
Who are your favorite type of athletes to work with, and what is going to get Italy back into the World Cup?
I know we got to talk about that. Okay, so
expanded pool.
Got it. Well, all right. Notwithstanding, moving the goalposts, making the goal wider. Okay, so yes, I mean, I'm a professor now, and also in my business, we have all of our our staff are younger kind of kinesiology graduates and all that. So I don't know that there's like one person specifically that I'm mentoring more than others, but I really like it. I'm involved. I really enjoy a lot, especially my work as a professor, because there's so many of the students that I see a little bit of myself in them. A lot of people study kinesiology initially because like me, they're an athlete, they're not quite sure, so they kind of it's a nice program and it's interesting, but they don't know what they want to do. And so there's quite a few that I do have the honor and the privilege to mentor, and it's really great. It's really rewarding. We'll see if anybody, we do have some good young strength and conditioning coaches that work in our facility too. I know you met a few of them, Kwame as well. So there's some good ones. You said the players that I've worked with, right? So so I'm always a little bit partial to players that I guess are maybe they're better than me, but they have maybe something that kind of I had, which is a really good work ethic, and are a little bit like humble in that sense that whatever I did get to level I got to, and as a player, I was I was usually the least talented, and so I had to work harder than everybody. And so that's one of the reasons that led me into doing this work as a career, was because I saw how, how you could take someone who's kind of average and maybe, become a good player simply by outworking everybody else. So those are the ones that I'm partial to. But I also, as a coach and everything, I recognize that it's really nice to find players that have a good work ethic, but also have that little special kind of tactical knowledge and game IQ. I think if you have that, if you have a good work ethic and game IQ, you can even get away with not being a great athlete. And so that's what I would say there. Finally, Italy. So here's what I got to say, guys. It's not my idea. It's soccernomics, right? But you got to take a more analytical approach to this, okay? Italy not qualifying for the World Cup even twice, guys, it's still an anomaly if you look at historically how successful the country has been, and specifically how successful they've been relative to those three metrics, which are population, GDP, and football experience. In between not getting to the World Cup, Italy won the Euro. Okay, and there was also a 2012 final appearance in the Euro. Obviously, there was a World Cup win in 2006, and there was a knockout stage, I think, in the quarterfinal of the Euro in 2016. So you need a larger sample size. Honestly, if anything, what hurts Italy a little bit is I think maybe just that they haven't, as opposed to, let's say, England and maybe Spain and Germany, I'm not so sure that Italy has put the same level of priority on their own national team players. Sometimes their national team players have to take a back seat in the big clubs to foreign stars. And I don't think that's always a bad thing, but perhaps maybe relative to some of the other top European nations, they're a little bit behind in that sense. But let's look at the bigger picture, and I'm not as concerned. I'm Italian. I love to see them win all the time for sure, but I'm not as concerned.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would say for that, I think like the key difference that I noticed, I think this is almost being a culprit of modern football, is that before, like when Italy went to that, if you look at all that tournament success, they played the same way in every single major tournament. You know exactly what you're going to get. They're going to be so fucking hard to play against. They're not going to break them down. You get one or two chances, maybe. Like they can't, like if they go through qualifying like that, they get hammered by the media because they're supposed to be better. Why don't they play like England? Why don't they play like Spain and Germany? And so it's not conducive to how they win tournaments and do well.
You're right. And it's funny that again, the World Cup of, was it 2014? I think that was the game where Italy played England in the group matches, and they had a very high number of passes connected. They called it Tiki Italia. It was sort of and it was like, this is not exactly how we're used to seeing the Italian team play. And, in the end, they couldn't sustain it. But, they've had moments. I thought they were quite good in Euro 2016 as well. I really liked it under Conte. Anyway.
Yeah, like you said, definitely a broad view. I was gonna say that during their early 2000s to 2012, you can see their success as well because of their league. The Italian Serie A was one of the best leagues in the world. Right, that was a top league. That's where all the superstars are. The Brazilians, all the top Italians are playing there. Del Piero, Pirlo, all those guys are all playing there. And because you're playing against the top competition all the time, that's what helped them build their national team as well. But I don't think Italy's done. I just think that the qualification, the Northern Macedonia, that's a 99 out of 100 times Italy wins that game.
That's what I mean? It's an anomaly. It's an anomaly.
It's an anomaly, 100%. But when you look at it in the past, like 15, 20 years, 100% Italy have been bosses. Even the tournaments that I think they shouldn't even have gone to the finals, that they've gone to the finals, is because of their discipline and how they play. Like the 2012 Euro final, when they played Spain and lost to Spain in the final, that was a generation of Spain that like no one was beating. So it's even Italy going to the final with Cassano and Balotelli is like, wow, like compared to all the other European teams. So yeah, I mean, shout it out to Italy. Hopefully they make it back to the top ranks, but they're still are they still considered top 10, top 15 in the world?
Oh yeah, they're up there.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're up there. So
I don't think they're
I
going to
think-
have more disappointment like that. I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just that the Toronto, Italia, or Italy versus Portugal on St. Clair beef that kind of hypes up the whole.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole
But
train.
remember, Portugal is
Adam, you gotta-
overperforming, right? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Hey, see,
Yeah.
look at it. See, you got to see it in person, Adam, bro. The Italy versus Portugal is crazy.
Yeah.
All right, but thank you so much. This has been episode 12 of Top Mid Talks presented by FTF Canada. I am your host with my co-host, Adam Jones. I'm Kwame Awua. Thank you, Richard, once again. I know we kept you on for a long time, but this is
All
definitely
good.
information that a lot of people don't know and they should know. I mean, this is the other side of football outside of the X's and O's that people should definitely keep in tune with. And thank you again, man. I appreciate you as always.
Oh, you're welcome, and it's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for for having me on, and I love to talk football out. As you can see, for 2 hours, without a break, and no problem. And if you'd like to have me on in the future again, it'd be my pleasure as well. And it's always good to see you, Kwame. Just come back in your off season again. We'll be happy to make you run.
As usual.
I'll come over too. We'll strap a GoPro to me and see how long.
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Hey, yo, it's hard, man. It's hard.
Oh, of course it is.
It's hard. The sprints on that treadmill, wow. Yeah, it's hard. But yeah, thank you again, man. I appreciate you.
Okay, thanks, guys. All right.
No problem. Have a good one.
Bye bye.